I'm Terry, and I'm with Southborough Access Media, and I have the pleasure of having Greg White in our SAM studio today, and he is the Chief of Staff, General Counsel for the Office of Consumer Affairs and Protection. So I'm wondering if you can explain to me, as we were talking earlier, there are many divisions that you oversee, and it's quite an impressive of things that and issues that you have under your under you.
Sure.
And one very hot button, but I know you'll touch on some others, are the scams that come up that affect all of us all the time.
Absolutely, that our office is very privy to. But you know, as we were saying before the show, a lot of times when folks hear consumer affairs, automatically they think of the Attorney General's office. They're a separate state entity. They're very important. They play a very important role. We work very closely with them, but they're the enforcer with a regulator. The Undersecretary Chapman likes to say that we regulate Main Street America. As we discussed before, you can't go down any main street in Massachusetts and not come across a business that we either regulate or license. An insurance company, a bank, a gas station, a barber shop. These are all entities that we license and regulate. And so we have a pretty broad mandate. We have actually 5 agencies under our umbrella. We have the Division of Banks, which is a entity that oversees and regulates state-chartered banks and credit unions. And there are about 184 in Massachusetts with combined assets of over $400 billion. They also regulate what they call the non-depository entities, which are the debt collectors, check cashing business, amongst other things. We oversee the Division of Insurance, which regulates healthcare, property insurance, auto insurance. They license over about 100,000 producers, insurance agents. They also oversee one of the important programs, and the only one in the United States, which is the Surcharge Appeal Board, which you may be familiar with. You get in an accident, your insurance company deems you more than 50% at fault. Next thing you know, you get a surcharge notice. You have, as a consumer, have a right to appeal that, and you can appeal it to our Surcharge Appeal Board. Last year we had 30,000 appeals. 2/3 of those were vacated. It's the only setup in the country. Most other states, all other 49 states, if you're in an accident, you appeal to your insurance company, which is a bit of a conflict there. You know,
big conflict of interest. So
right.
I want to make a guess and say that not everybody understands that they can appeal the insurance. So this is so important that you are out visiting and explaining some of these things that you see all the time, but are really far-reaching.
Right, exactly.
For all of us.
Exactly.
That you're there to protect
consumers.
Main Street.
Yeah, and we have a dual role. We're there to regulate businesses within our world, but we're there to advocate on behalf of consumers. You know, so the various divisions under our umbrella, all of them have consumer outreach units. So if you have, for instance, a situation with a foreclosure, you can reach out to the Division of Banks. If you have an issue with your insurance company, you can reach out to our Division of Insurance. In addition to that, we also have the Department of Telecommunications and Cable, which regulates the telecommunications and cable industry of Massachusetts. The Division of Standards, which we've talked about briefly with skimming devices. They're responsible, amongst other things, to license gas stations and fuel pumps. One of the things that they've been very actively involved in is addressing the skimming devices that are showing up in these machines that we can talk about a little later on. They also regulate glass repair shops, auto repair shops, auctioneers, amongst other things. Anything to do with weights and measures. So they inspect price scanners at department stores and grocery stores.
So when you say price scanners, you go through a grocery store, you go through a department store, any of the big box stores. you're talking about that little red
Yes,
scanner
yeah.
that you go through?
Exactly. Anything involving weights and measures. We recently had an action working with the City of Boston at Logan Airport a year ago, in which we went in to inspect at one of the terminals the weights that they're weighing your bag with. Now, if it's over a certain amount, they charge you. We want to make sure that the machine that they're using to make that determination is in fact accurate.
That it's fair.
Yeah, it's fair and accurate. And so anything involving weights and measures is overseen by the Division of Standards. And then we have the Division of Professional Licensure, which is our largest entity. They just consolidated with the Department of Public Safety. So they license over 500,000 licensees and tradespeople in Massachusetts, from chiropractors to accountants, social workers, electricians, plumbers, amongst other things. They regulate nuclear power plants, the Boxing Commission, amusement parks, elevator inspectors, amongst other things. And they have a complaint process that if you've been aggrieved by dealing with one of these entities, you can file a complaint. They also recently put into place an online licensing and renewal, so that in the past you'd either have to mail it in or come into Boston. Now you go online, you can renew your license to be an accountant or to be a chiropractor online. It makes it much more efficient.
Smooth.
Yes.
Smooth and the way it should be
Sure,
done.
sure.
So
Yeah.
that's a wonderful advancement.
Yeah.
So I want to touch upon a couple of things,
Sure.
and so please jump in. You mentioned skimmers and scanners
Yep.
and protecting your identity. So maybe we can break a few things down.
Sure.
So I go to a gas pump and I go to insert my card, or any place where you have to insert your card, and it's you are servicing yourself. You're
Sure.
not handing it to anybody. So my understanding is that a skimmer is another device that's been put in place of the one that's owned by the merchant that can steal your credit card information.
There are two types of skimmers that they've come up with. There's skimmers and there's shimmers.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Skimmers is, and we'll provide your studio with PDFs of showing some of these skimming devices, but many of the skimming devices that are showing up in these gas pumps, what they'll do in the dead of night, they'll go into a gas station, they'll pry open the pump, and they will put a device in there, and it consists of a number of wires, and basically it's hooked up to the pad, so that, as well as where you put your credit card. So one is it's capturing the information on the card, and the other is capturing the PIN number. And they've become very sophisticated. Back in the day when they first started showing up, a proprietor would locate this device. They would see that the seal had been broken, they'd gone in, they see the skimming device, they'd notify the local authorities, would notify the FBI, the Secret Service. They'd come up, set up surveillance, and when the individual came back to retrieve the device, they would apprehend them. Now they become very sophisticated. They utilize Bluetooth. They leave the device in there. It's cost of doing business. They've even come up with another type of device in which they use parts from a cell phone, so that the information, when you're punching it in, it's sending it out via text message to the individual who set up or put this device in. So they've become very sophisticated. There's a group operating out of Eastern Europe that has been recently prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office. And they're halfway around the world, many respects, having distributed this information. We recently had a cybersecurity conference with our the banking industry. We had CEOs and bank presidents from various financial institutions throughout Massachusetts. We did it at the Federal Reserve, and we had a member of the FBI come in, and he talked about a specific case. It was a mom and pop store up in upstate New York. They had put these devices in some of their machines. And
so it's a very low profile.
Oh yeah, it's showing up.
Location.
It could be this was just a small little mom and pop store, but it was a high tourism area that got a lot of traffic, and they put these devices in. They distributed the information worldwide with a caveat that they weren't to release it until they had given the green light for the date and time, at which point they gave them the green light. Within 2 hours, millions of dollars had been compromised, and that was just one small entity. So it's you know, as we said before the show, it's not a matter of whether or not you or myself, our information is going to be compromised.
It's when.
That's a given, and how many times. You know, when I started off as a prosecutor here in Worcester County, back in the day, identity theft consisted of someone stealing your wallet. Now they don't even have to leave their home. They can access your information through skimming devices, and they're not only on gas pumps. They're in ATM machines. They're handheld skimming devices in which what they'll do is they'll walk through bus terminals, airports, train station, and they have these handheld devices. They cover it up and they skim up against you, your wallet, your purse, and they're downloading your personal information depending upon the type of card you have, and accessing the information that way. So you're not even aware of it. You haven't even taken your credit card out of your wallet or your purse. So
in that instance, the picture that you're drawing, we're all targets, no matter the age. It's not a specific category or population of people. It's just anybody who is out there. And at least in terms of the wallets, I think at least what I have bought is a wallet that says RFID protection.
Yes, in fact, I have a few protective sleeves that I brought along for you. Yeah, you can purchase this.
And
yes.
that sounds so simple, but it's every time the technology changes, there's something new that comes out that's bigger, better. And so myself, and I'm sure others included, how do you protect yourself? And I want people to understand that they can reach out to your agency.
Sure.
And you have a hotline as
yes,
well?
We do.
And talk to me about that.
Sure. So in addition to the 5 divisions that we oversee, we also have our own individual mandates. So we have a do not call list. So if you've been harassed by telemarketers or scammers, you know, people say, well, I'm on the do not call list, but I'm getting these calls from the IRS. Well, if they're not abiding by the laws, they're not going to abide by a do not call list. We suggest that consumers invest in a landline and an answering machine. They hate that because they can't get through to a live person, but most people are getting rid of their landlines. We oversee the the data breach. So if you're an entity and you hold personal information of Massachusetts resident, that information has been compromised, you're required to notify our office along with the Attorney General's office the nature of the breach, how many Massachusetts residents have been impacted, and what you're doing to rectify it. Recently with Experian and you know, Target and all these others, you know, we're inundated. Last year we had 200,000 Massachusetts residents were breached. That'll be a fraction considered the recent breach. We oversee the lemon law arbitration program. So if you've been aggrieved by purchasing a new or used vehicle, you can apply for arbitration through our office. We oversee one of our most important programs is the home improvement contracting program, which we've spent the past almost 2 years making significant changes. If you're doing home improvement contracting in Massachusetts, for the most part, with very few exceptions, you're required to have an HIC through our office. You pay a one-time fee into the guarantee fund, which I'll talk about in a moment, and you pay a registration fee that you renew every 2 years. The consumer needs to know that, because when you enter into a contract, and that should be a written contract with a contractor, you want to make sure that they're in fact registered through our office. It provides you with a level of protection. Number one, when you enter into this contract, you check with our office to see if in fact they're registered, and more importantly, have they been disciplined in the past. So if you've been aggrieved by a home improvement project, you can file a complaint with our office. We have attorneys on staff, and they conduct hearings in which they can make a determination that there's no basis for the complaint, or they can fine the contractor, they can suspend the contractor's registration, or revoke the registration. And that's very important because you can't do any type of home improvement work without spending thousands of dollars. And when you think of it, your biggest asset is your home. And so you want to protect that. We talked about before the show some of the scams that are going out there. Most of the contractors that we deal with are legitimate, who are doing the right thing. You know, one of the contractors that my wife and I dealt with recently said to me, you know, we want to do a good job because with social media, they put out a bad review. That has a huge impact on your ability to operate.
It works, and unfortunately, bad news travels pretty quickly.
Exactly.
But when somebody, there's a lot of referrals that come word of mouth.
Yep.
And I think being aware of these protections,
Sure.
and to know that there's some accountability that
Yep.
has to happen makes the contractors or whoever it is that you're licensing
Yes.
more invested
Yep.
in what they're doing, and hopefully that has a rippling effect where
Exactly.
the right thing is happening.
It is done. And so when you enter into a contract, you should make sure it's written. We provide a sample contract through our office, and we can give you some input in terms of that. But more importantly, if you do enter a contract with a registered contractor and you are agreed by the process, provided you meet the criteria, you can apply to our guarantee fund, and provided you meet the criteria, you can recoup up to $10,000 from our guarantee fund to settle the aggravation that you've gone through. That's an important program that we administer. We've, as I said, revamped our entire program. We're working very closely, by the way, with town officials, town building inspectors. They are first line of defense. We're asking them that prior to issuing any building permit, that you ensure that that individual is properly registered. And what we tell consumers, that you shouldn't go ahead and pull the permit. If you've hired a contractor, that's their responsibility. If you pull the permit, you void yourself of the guaranteed funds. So the home...
So that's a very important
Yes.
point,
Yeah.
that if somebody suggests that go pull a permit,
Yeah.
that it's actually under the job description for the person that's doing the work.
And more importantly, it voids your ability to access the guaranteed funds. So, you know, again, we advise consumers just to be proactive when entering into a contract with a home improvement contractor. We license the HIC program. We also oversee the CSL, which is Construction Supervisor License, through the Department of Public Division of Professional Licensure. So that's another license that's contractors required to have. Most of the work involving home improvement requires both an HIC and a CSL. And again, you could contact our office to make sure that they have the appropriate license as well as the registration. So that's one of the most important programs that we have. But finally, the group that is our ears and our eyes, for the most part out there, are our co-op students from Northeastern. We have 4 co-op students from Northeastern that spend 6 months throughout the year with us. We had a group that started this past summer. They're finishing up in December. We have another group coming in January and will be with us through June. They answer hundreds of calls a day from consumers throughout Massachusetts. Now, we tell consumers that they're not lawyers. They're not there to provide legal advice, but they can answer basic questions. If they don't have the answer, they can refer you to one of our agencies or another state agency to provide you with that information. As part of their information gathering, they are also privy to hearing about all the scams and all the types of identity thefts that are taking place out there. And towards that end, as we talked about before the show, there are so many different scams that are occurring out there. You have the IRS scam, which has been around for years.
Very long time.
Unfortunately, people are still, especially the elderly, are being victimized by it. There's a new twist to the IRS scam in that in the past they would say you need us to wire the money to avoid criminal prosecution. Now they'll say they're targeting the immigrant community. They're saying that if you don't wire us money, you're going to be deported. So they've put a little twist on it. You have the fake lottery scam. Again, that's been around forever. People are still being victimized by it. The Boston Globe did an article over the past 18 months about individuals who have been victimized by the scam. One individual had in fact been contacted by 3 entities saying that he had won hundreds of thousands of dollars and he needed to pay the taxes in order to receive that. Then he received a 4th call from another entity that said, listen, by law, you can only collect more than, you only can collect on 1 per year unless you join our association, and then you can collect on all 3. Over the course of this year, the guy had been billed out $100,000, you know, and so
That's terrible.
Yeah, it is terrible, and many of them prey on the elderly. You know, we talked about the Yes scam.
Yes. Oh, yes. Please talk about some of these, the biggest issues that you're seeing right now, because getting the word out there is, when you have the knowledge,
Sure.
it's a way of protecting yourself. So I myself have received calls from this Yes scam. So please explain what that is.
Well, as you and I discussed beforehand, what they'll do is they will call you and then they'll pretend that they've dropped the headset and they'll say to you, can you hear me, can you hear me? And once you respond in the affirmative, they record that. Next thing you know, you're being sent items that you never purchased. And they're saying, well, we got your voice approving that. You know, that has really gotten out there this past year. I had just heard about it in January, and now I hear about it over and over again. The hotel scam that recently came in to our hotline. You'll check into a hotel. They'll take your credit card as part of the check-in process, you know, for anything that you might use in the room. You'll leave, you'll go up to your room, about 40 minutes later the phone will ring, they'll say it's the front desk, that the clerk didn't take the information down correctly. They need you to read your credit card, provide your expiration, as well as your 3-digit security code. And this individual isn't employed by the hotel. He's not even in the hotel. There was someone outside the front desk listening in, and the next thing you know, you're being victimized by this scam. The one-ring scam, are you familiar with that?
I am not.
This is something that we've learned about this past year and a half. There's a group operating out of the Caribbean, and what they'll do is they'll call your phone, they'll allow it to ring once, and then they'll hang up. If you're like most people and you see a missed call, you don't recognize it, you want to know who it is, you call them back. You're connected to an outfit in the Caribbean. I don't know how it works in terms of the setup, but the longer they keep you on the line, the longer it runs up a bill. And recently, this past year, my phone rang in my office. I didn't recognize it. I called back, and then one of the attorneys was walking by, and I mentioned, and he said, oh, no, that's the one-ring scam. You should contact your carrier and let them know, and I did, and I avoided any charges. But that's another one that we're seeing a lot of, the Microsoft. You know.
So I find it fascinating that you yourself have experienced these things, so you are the boots on the ground as well as the person in charge that is able to do something. So sharing all of this information of how we can protect ourselves as the technology changes, it just becomes more complex and more difficult. So you need to be more vigilant and just be proactive to protect yourself.
Exactly.
And I think when we were speaking earlier, you talked about freezing your credit with the Experian, one of the credit agencies.
Sure.
Explain how that works.
Sure. Well, you know, again, we were talking beforehand, and I got a call one week. It was my mortgage company saying my information had been compromised. I also worked in one of the presidential administrations, and about 2 years ago, the federal system was hacked. It was one of the largest hacked, involving over 20 million former and current federal employees. They got all our information. So within 1 week, my information had been compromised by my mortgage company and my former employer. So I went ahead and I put a credit freeze on it, which basically, if you go to purchase someone, they run your credit history. If there's a freeze on it, there's a flag. Recently,
and that's if you go to open a credit.
Open a credit. So
open a credit, but not charge something, but open.
Right, open a
credit.
credit. And that's many times what they'll do is they'll get your personal information and they'll open a line of credit, and next thing you know, you've purchased a new car that you weren't even aware of. So as part of that,
nice.
I had gone in, my wife and I had gone to an electronics store, and as part of the promotion, they said, open up a card and you get 10% off. You can pay it all off, and
which are very attractive.
Exactly. So I said, sure, why don't I gave him my social security number, my personal information. He came back, he said, it's been declined. I said, what do you mean declined? He said, you need to call our corporate office. So I called them, and they said, did you recently put a freeze on your credit report? Well, that had been put on over a year ago, and it's only supposed to stay in effect 90 days. And I said, yes. They said, well, you should have it removed. And I said, no, I'm going to keep it. Well, we used my wife's personal information, and it's been very effective. Now, it can be a bit of a hassle because I went to renew a lease, and the block was on it. So it took me forever, but I finally found the right number to contact to remove the freeze. And you can remove it permanently. You can remove it for 30 days or 60 days. I removed it for 30 days, just to allow me to refinance on a new lease, and then put it back on. That way, they can't attempt to use your information by setting up a line of credit. Again, we talked about before the show the woman who was working for a contractor, and she found the office I was with and said, oh, recently I went to refinance on my home and found out someone had my personal information. They purchased a condominium in her name and purchased a brand new vehicle. She wasn't aware of it until she went to refinance it, nor would she unless they defaulted, at which point they would on some of the payments. So.
Okay, now to follow through on that story,
Sure.
The woman that was in that situation, what is the recourse that she has that, maybe it's a year or maybe it's 2 years later that she finds out? How can she do that?
Well, you can, on an annual basis, by law, they're required to provide you a credit report. Review your credit report on an annual basis and make sure that any information that is on there is in fact accurately attributed to you. And if it's not, then you go through the process, which in and of itself can be grueling. But you need to do it in order to make sure that someone's not out there having compromised your information, running up a line of credit, and then defaulting on it. And then it's your credit history that's been impacted. But putting we advise consumers, if in fact you have been a victim of a breach, that notify the local law enforcement. But one of the chiefs of police on the show that I was on a year ago said, Greg, we get dozens of people coming into our department, wanting to lodge a complaint. He said, most of these people are halfway around the world. There's not much we can do. But if in fact you've been a victim of identity theft, notify the financial institution, put a credit freeze on it, and then review your report periodically to make sure that, again, the information is in fact accurate. But
now, when you talk about this as a tool, a credit freeze, is that the steps to do something like that? Is that a matter of contacting an individual credit card company, or is it the credit reporting agencies that have the ability? So that would be Experian, TransUnion.
Yep, the top three. Now, you could do it on all three. You could do it on one. Most of them will hit one of those three. So if you really want to be proactive, you can contact all three. I have it on just one, and it's worked very effectively. So But, you know, those are steps you get, you know, protecting your password for your computer. You know, they get into your computer, all your personal information is on that. Investing in a paper shredder. You know, there is a concept I'm sure you're familiar with called dumpster divers.
Oh, yes. My understanding of dumpster diving isn't just in a dumpster. It can be through a trash can, but through your home, whatever you throw out for paperwork or those pre-approved advertisements that come for credit, as well as pre-printed checks that come.
Exactly.
And all you have to do is sign it. And so diving can be very lucrative.
It is.
And it can be at work, it can be
at
your
home.
home.
You know, so we advise consumers to invest in a paper shredder. It's cheap money. You know, people throw out old tax returns saying, oh, it's been a few years. It may contain your social security number, personal information. So you want to protect your information to the best of your ability. You know, at the end of the day, there's just no foolproof way of doing so. Someone asked me, you know, how can you positively ensure that you're never going to be a victim?
And you can.
Well, you can just use cash, not use a computer, you know. That's impractical. You know?
Unless we're all going to live out in the woods or under a rock somewhere,
exactly.
it's not the world we live in. So just being you talking about these things, bringing the awareness and the recourse that we have. Who can we reach out to if we suspect something? And you mentioned your local authorities. You mentioned that you have a resource of students that are the frontline people.
Yes.
And so it sounds like that there's actually a lot of things out there that we can do, but you need to be aware. So if you're not aware, you just have to be careful about your credit and your identity.
Absolutely.
And that there are people out there that would just love to have it and make it their own.
Yes, and you know,
including yours,
including mine, which they have. You know, but you can also not only contact our office, and I'll provide you folks with the toll-free number, but we have a website, and it's a pretty user-friendly website. It has all our agencies under our umbrella. It has all the mandates, individual mandates that I talked about, the home improvement contract and the lemon law. It can answer basic questions, can allow you to provide you with forms or what have you. So all that information is out there. So the very thing that can be used to compromise your information can also be a resource of information, which is the internet. You can reach out to our office through the internet and have a wealth of information at your disposal. And if you need any guidance, then you can contact our co-op students, and they can provide you with that insight.
Fantastic. Do you have any other pearls that you would like to share with us
Well,
today,
I would, but we'd probably go into another
and I would like to do that.
Sure.
Perhaps we can do that again.
Absolutely.
I would love to do that.
I would enjoy coming back.
Thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you for having me.
Mr. Greg White, Chief Counsel at the Office of Consumer Protection Agency.
Yep.
And we will provide the information and show the pictures that you shared so that all of our viewers can understand what's happening and what's out there.
Yeah, we would, and we invite you to contact our office or go on our website if you're looking for any additional information.
Fantastic.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you.